You are listening to the 4-Phase Cycle Podcast with your hosts, Megan and Alex of Zesty Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you have come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, we use the 4 phases of the feminine cycle in combination with functional lab work to transform the lives of the women we work with. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your own doctor before making changes. Ready to take control of your health? Let's get started.
Hi there. Welcome back to class 3 of our podcast. This is Alex, your host. Thank you so much for joining me again. I'm so happy to share this information with you and just to chat about all this stuff. Megan and I are obsessed. So in this podcast, it's going to be a little bit shorter. I wanted to do a quick class on the overview of the 4 phases and why we break those down the way that we do, and then why we have basically 2 halves, why the first and second phase go together and why phase 3 and 4 go together, and what we're focusing on in each of those 4 halves, okay? So that's going to be the deal. So the 4 phases, like we talked about last week, is going to be, the first one is the release phase. That is day 1 of your cycle, and then starting day 1, going for around 7 days. Then phase 2 is the rise phase, and that is when our hormones are rising, everything's getting boosted up. We're building all our eggs for the dominant follicle to be ovulated, and that phase ends after we ovulate, okay? And then phase 3 is the plateau phase. That's when our estrogen and progesterone balance out, and that's the time we really begin to balance out everything that we've been putting together. And then the last phase is the pause phase, which is, again, kind of the relaxation time, the move down, coming full circle and getting to the start of the new cycle once again, and doing some of that integration and being retrospective work. All of that comes into play there. So those are the 4 phases, and I'll do a recording and a class for every single phase, and we'll go through each one in detail. But this one, I just wanted to cover how they are and then answer some questions. So we always get asked, what is actually day 1 that we're counting? Day 1 is your first full-blown day of your period. So a lot of you are coming to us with spotting and other abnormalities in your cycle. That's okay. You don't count the spotting. You count the first full day of your period as day 1. So that will kick off the release phase. And there's actually a little sub phase underneath there that's called the dark sub phase. And that's the first 3 days. And we've talked about that in the previous 2 classes, where some of that is very important physiologically, but it's also very, very advantageous to us as women mentally, because it gives us a time to rest and plan out how the rest of the cycle is going to go. So it's a very, very important time, but it's pretty short. That dark sub phase is just the first 3 days. And then we go on, kind of, if you zoom out from the 4 phases, we actually group the first 2 phases, the release and the rise phase, and that time, the first half of the cycle, is going to be all about inflammation and optimizing inflammation. And then the 3rd and 4th phases, which are the plateau and pause, they're all going to be focusing on detoxing. So let's say you have the average 28-day cycle. These phases then, for all 4 of them, are going to be 4 7-day phases. So each of them at 7 days. And then if you ovulate on day 14, that's where the rise phase stops. You can get a little bit more granular on this actually by doing the LH strips, which we talked about as homework last class. So if you want to get more into it, you can actually pinpoint the exact day that you ovulate, and that'll help figure out where the phases fall in for you. If you don't want to do that and you just want to do the basic plan, you just break up the 4 phases equally amongst the days that you have your cycle. So if you have a 24-day cycle, you're just going to spend 6 days in each of the phases. If you have a 32-day cycle, you're just going to spend 8 days in each of the phases. So that is perfectly fine to do, and that's a great way to get started. If you want to get more serious with figuring out ovulation, then what you're going to do is after you end your period, you're going to start testing for ovulation with the LH strips. After you ovulate, that day is going to mark the very end of the first half of the cycle. So I'll give you an example. My cycle is 26 days generally, and I usually ovulate on day 12. And so for me, the first 2 phases I split in half. So for 12 days, the first phase is 6 days and the second phase is 6 days. After that, though, my second half is actually a little bit longer, and so I break up phases 3 and 4 equally among that half. Okay, so you can see they're not exactly split evenly. I have 2 more days that I spend in phase 3 or 4, but that's totally fine. That's just how my body wants to work. And so you can get very clear on what you want to do. Okay, so phases 1 and 2 are going to be all about inflammation. Phases 3 and 4 are going to be all about detoxing. And the reason we do it that way is because you want to do the things that will set up the next part of the cycle to be successful. And so the way that we set this up is that you are always setting yourself up for success for the next phase and the next phase and the next phase. And then that way it's basically like a little stepwise ladder approach instead of spinning in circles where you're like, I don't know what to do. I'm trying these random supplements that I only got through half a bottle before I realized they don't work for me. Like all of this stuff, you're basically just turning around in a circle. What we want is that you're always building success for the next part. And then that way you can watch yourself cycle by cycle by cycle get better and better and better. And then when you look back 6 months, you're like, oh my gosh, like look how different my life is. And for us, we've realized how much easier things are. The other reason we change focus halfway through is not only because physiologically that's how it works, and I'll explain that in each individual class, but it's much easier to do this when you don't feel like you're constantly falling off and forgetting to do everything. So if you've been someone that's been following a natural living lifestyle for a while, you probably have a huge list in your head of things you know you should do, right? And so we are always sort of tend to run around and being like, oh shoot, I forgot to dry skin brush for the last 3 weeks. Oh shoot, like I forgot to coconut oil pull. Oh, I forgot my morning elixir. Like you're kind of constantly feeling like you're picking up the balls that you're dropping as you juggle everything. In breaking up into 2 discrete phases, it gives, and having, tracking the phases, especially with that app that we recommended, what you're doing is that you never feel like you have to do one thing all the time, or that your list of healthy things to do will actually take you like 2 hours a day to get done. And that's never really the goal. The point is not to spend so much time on health that you don't live your life. The whole point is to be healthy so that you can do everything else in your life that you want to do. And so really it's a way to simplify, in that it takes away that feeling of like, oh, I'm constantly like unable to keep up with this. It's a way to say like, this is the phase for this, and then when that phase is over, I'm done with that for this cycle, right? So I only do my detoxing tools in the second half. Then in the first half, if I don't do them, I don't feel bad about it. That's not something that's like weighing on me. They're just taken care of. There's a time and a place for everything, and that's fine. You'll also find that there is some overlap in the opposite configuration. You'll see that phase 1 and phase 4 are the more gentler introspection, retrospection, planning, discussing that phase. Those two kind of get lumped together. And then phases 2 and 3 are more active phases where we take action, we start new things, we figure out how it works, we make improvements, we make conscious decisions of where we want to go. And we'll be able to group them that way. So there's lots of different ways to play with these 4 phases so that you can live your life in the way that you wanted, okay? And And so all of this is designed to make it as clear and easy and simple as it can possibly be, while being really, really effective, because we don't want to have, of course we want things to be effective, but we don't want, by the time they get effective, it's so much work that it's just unreasonable to live like that. So that's why we do it that way. Hopefully that makes some sense. This class is going to be short, so I'm going to wrap it up here, but make sure you click on over, find the phase that you're on next, and go listen to that, and then circle back around until you've listened to all 4 phases. Okay? All right. Thanks for joining me. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks for stopping by this Podclass. If you are ready to dig deeper into your health, really understand your cycle, stop guessing with random supplements, and start testing, our Healthy Hormones group starts September 27th. You can find more details at zestyginger.com/healthy hormones and find out if this is the place for you. And as always, we offer free 20-minute consultations, so jump on the phone with us and we'll help you decide if it's a good fit.